Actually, when Rich rang me up and said, would you do a talk, Trev? Of course I would, Rich. Well, what do you want it to be? What is everybody else talking about? And he said, oh, it's all a bit up in the air at the moment. So I said, you want me to do a talk about the cloud, do you? I said, well, the trouble is, you guys know more about the cloud than I do. You live and breathe it on a day-by-day basis, I'm sure. But my background, rather than peering and network engineering, is telecoms. And if we wind the clock back a bit, when I worked for Mitel Semiconductor, I started life in the semiconductor industry, I developed the first integrated IP phone processor chip from an ARM processor and an Oak DSP. And then I moved to work for Mitel Telecoms to work on their first SIP PBX. Okay? And then 9/11 came along, and the whole bubble burst, and everybody got laid off. So Mitel laid off all of their SIP stuff, except for me, who they kept on a contract on 2 days a week, right? Just to make it look as if they still were in the SIP game. Because I was on the board of the SIP forum at the time. We were one of the sort of founding members of the SIP forum in the early days. And so in that 2 weeks, in the time when I was working 2 days a week, to cut a long story short, we basically set up Tomico as a service provider, and Tomico were one of the 14 or 15 first VoIP service providers in the UK. I think Gamma was very much just starting around about the same time, right? And when I was at Tomico, of course, as a full service communications provider, we had our own infrastructure and our own data center and stuff, and that's when I got involved with LONAP, which was a very fantastic 8 years. So anyway, so I decided I would talk about telecoms in the cloud and see where it goes. And telecoms in the public cloud, so is there any? First of all, I now work with a company called Netaxis. I contract with them. Netaxis, when I started, they were turning over about 3 million, Andy, and now they're about 7 million. And they're doing it because they have a lot of fantastic telco customers in the world. You know, a lot of these big brand names, you know, a lot of them are incumbents. Some of them are small startup types. And the map here, and what we do for them is we basically do middleware that helps them automate their processes and cut their costs and speed up time to market for new products and services. And the map on the side shows geographically where our customers are located. There's one thing that you can't quite see, but we've got one customer in the Far East called Singtel, and Singapore is too small to feature as a blue dot there. And just below Iceland somewhere, we've got the Faroe Islands. So we ran the Faroe Islands telephone. They've got about 4,000 subscribers to their phone system in the Faroe Islands. So anyway. And if we look at the cloud, okay, this is the growth forecast for the public cloud. It's huge. I didn't quite appreciate how big it is. But from, where are we? Just around $600 million today. In the next 5 years, it's projected to grow to $1 trillion, right? And you can see the three main areas for it. There's infrastructure, there's software as a service, and platform as a service. Now, I can't find any data that shows me how much of that is telecoms. And I'll tell you, it's quite small, really, in relation. If we look at who are the main players, they're quite, you know, they're the obvious ones, aren't they? AWS, this is a snapshot of, again, I couldn't find the market share data very easily, but this is a snapshot of the infrastructure as a service revenues in Q2 of this year, 65 billion. AWS, a third of the market. And the top three there, that actually reflects on a quarter-by-quarter basis who are the main players, right? There are some smaller, interesting ones here with IBM, Alibaba, Salesforce. Well, you know, some of these are obvious what their participation in the cloud is. Then there's Oracle, who's a relatively small player. And I'll just show you. And the reason I'm talking about Oracle, because these four players here, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and Oracle, are the four cloud players that you see when you talk to telcos, okay? And pitched themselves very much as a telco cloud. Quite interesting, if you look at the dates for introduction of the clouds, Amazon were the first, right? They're now the biggest. It's pretty obvious, isn't it, why? Google came second, and then Microsoft were third. But Microsoft is twice the level of business as Google. And I think that's probably down to the likes of business such as Office 365 and Teams and stuff like that is included in, because they are as a service type services, aren't they? Features. And Oracle, although it's very much smaller than the others, okay, Oracle, a lot of Oracle's cloud business is just moving Oracle kit into the cloud, right? But they are very much, there are some quarters where they are by far the fastest growing cloud. Now, this is a pretty obvious cloud slide, right? And after this, when I first said I'd do this talk, I basically went on Google Bard and said, write me a 20-minute talk about telecoms in the cloud, right? And it was total crap, right? And this is the only 3 bullet points that I've kept, right? And they're obvious, aren't they? Why you should use the cloud? Scalability and agility, decreasing cost, improvement, all that kind of stuff. And mature and robust platforms, heavy investment in infrastructure and security. And I thought I'd leave this in because actually, whilst all this is true, right, when you're talking about the voice world, what some people might consider to be a robust and uptime might be okay for non-mission critical services, it's not necessarily okay for voice, okay? And we'll have a look a little bit about that in a minute now. But security, interestingly, that was one thing I was quite interested in, is that because the cloud, the public cloud, is such an easy target for DDoS, for cyber security attacks and everything, there's an awful lot of work gone into improving the security of the public cloud. And so that is quite a relevant aspect of looking at it from the telco perspective. Now then, so if we consider then there are the 4 telcos that are mainly quoted or used when telecoms are, 4 cloud vendors when telcos are involved. Okay, they've all got the usual pitch. We've got loads of features, we got fantastic robustness, etc. But interestingly, there are some specific telecoms pitches that they've all focused in on. And Google, when you think about it, it's not a surprise really, but Google introduced a product called Telecom Subscriber Insights, which actually, it's all about data mining the telco customers to bring out information about their subscribers that you can use to create some money somehow. In Google's case, typically ad revenue, isn't it? But so that's quite an interesting thing and you can understand where they come from, their strengths are. AWS, okay, they actually have their own integrated private wireless networks. They've got lots of components designed for wireless networks, and they do a lot of support for telco standards. And I suspect, in a couple of slides, I'll show you who's using which cloud. And you can see AWS are there, and have been there for quite some time in the telco space. Azure, that's Microsoft, obviously. I think the main takeout from the Microsoft perspective is that 2 or 3 years ago, actually, Microsoft bought a company called Metaswitch and Affirmed Networks. And I wasn't quite sure why they did that. Metaswitch are a smaller competitor to Cisco and the Broadworks platform. And they have, in the States, they had about 50 small telco customers. But Metaswitch also have a lot of core 5G components, right? And you'll see in a minute why that's quite important to Microsoft. At the time, I just thought that Microsoft would be getting into the PBX game, right, and compete with the likes of Cisco. And finally, Oracle, okay, they're pitching themselves as a telco cloud. I haven't got the bullet point in here, but Oracle, of course, in the telecoms world, Oracle are quite a big telco provider, vendor. They have probably the session border controllers with the biggest market share, and they have routing engines and stuff. And that's all available in the Oracle cloud. And Netaxis, not Tomiko, do a lot of work with Oracle, which I'll discuss. And so some of the data points that I've got are Oracle related, because they're the only people I could get hold of, right? So, which telcos are using which cloud? There's a theme here. You can see these are all new kids on the block, okay? Vonage, 8x8, the over-the-top players. WebEx. Is there one, can you spot the one I've missed out there? That Microsoft, okay, with Teams. So Vonage use AWS principally. 8x8, I rang our mutual friend at 8x8, Nick, and he says they use them all, AWS, OCI, Azure, and Google. And interestingly, their biggest issue is he's got all these engineers all around the world developing new services on these platforms, and their biggest issue is interoperability. He says he has to work very hard to stop engineers from using the AWS VMware platform or something, for example, right? Because VMware working on AWS will not necessarily bring out all the same features that the Azure version or the Google version do, right? So that's quite an interesting insight into, really to use more than one cloud is not straightforward, right? Zoom, you'll notice here, it used them all except for Azure, because Zoom is a big competitor to Microsoft Teams, and they do run all of their Zoom meetings, that basically core to the business, in the Oracle Cloud. Okay, so, but all of these people are public cloud users because they haven't got their own infrastructure. Even Cisco with WebEx, the original WebEx uses AWX. Cisco for WebEx calling have their own cloud. It's not a public cloud per se, okay, but in EMEA it's based in Equinix in Frankfurt, London, and Amsterdam. And they've also had to build sovereign clouds in various parts of the world where government regulations say you can't go out, take your data outside the country. So Turkey, Saudi, India. So WebEx is not really a public cloud. Now, this is perhaps a more interesting slide. So these are all traditional telcos, okay? Now, there's something, without going into anyone specific to start off with, that jumps out the page, and that is 5G, right? 5G, most of the people in that space are using the public cloud, from what I can see. Right? 5G was designed from the get-go to work in the public cloud. The network functions are cloud native, and you can see here there's a huge amount of investment going into it. Some of these people I've never heard of, but Dish is the fourth mobile network in the States, spending $10 million on their 5G rollout, right? And they're all using all of the different players to certain extents, right? There's a few here worth picking out where has been relevant to the overall discussion, right? One is Vodafone. Vodafone aren't using the public cloud for their core, but what they have done is they've done a lift and shift for an instance of the Oracle cloud to run all their back office functions. So there's 13 racks in a Vodafone data center somewhere, which is obviously they've decided that it's better to use the cloud infrastructure than to try and run it themselves. Similarly, where are we? Telecom Italia Nuvola. Nuvola is Italian, it's a play on the word cloud in Italian, right? Basically outsourced the running of all their data centers to Google, and Google are transitioning the whole of the data center infrastructure to Google's own cloud infrastructure. And there's one other somewhere. BT. That's worth talking about, because BT's investment is very much 5G, and it's with Microsoft. So BT are one of the few trialists for Operator Connect for mobile, if that's the right terminology. Andy probably and that's running quite late. But the reason BT are doing it, and you'll see in the slides to come, is because that's perceived that 5G is the growth area for a lot of these mobile operators. Only 6 minutes left. I don't know how many slides I've got. Okay, some of the challenges then: compliance, legacy systems, trying to move them, because you can see that most of it 5G. None of the legacy networks have moved into the cloud. Okay, performance requirements, interop I've already spoken about. Okay, so why aren't people moving legacy systems? Okay. Probably most of them haven't fully depreciated their legacy systems yet. And the engineering cost of re-engineering it to move into the cloud is prohibitive, okay? This is a small example of a friend of mine has a an award-winning Queen's Award for Industry, ITSP on the South Coast. And they got, a year or two ago, they were subject to massive DDoS attacks. And they've looked at all sorts of different ways of circumventing it and preventing it happen. And in the end, basically, all they did was they froze new development for a couple of years and spent all the money upgrading their own infrastructure. So they've got massive overkill on the connectivity and the transit links and stuff. And they did look at moving to the cloud, right? Because obviously the whole pitch with the cloud is you could scale up very easily. So you scale up to cope with the amount of extra traffic involved in the DDoS attack. But there are two things. First of all, they designed their whole network themselves. And the cost of moving that into the cloud was hugely prohibitive. And also the scalability of the cloud was very expensive to them. Even though they're now paying for connectivity that they don't need, it's still more expensive for them to do it in the cloud. Compliance, that's gone away really because, as you saw, Cisco have built sovereign clouds in different jurisdictions because they had to. And there are so many cloud instances around the world now. I don't know if you call them instances. The whole compliance issue seems to have gone away. Performance, as I speak, I sense the seconds are ticking away faster here. Right? So this is an Oracle slide, but you can see Oracle, because there were new kids on the block, Larry Ellison allegedly hired some of the key engineers from Amazon and said, here's a blank check, build me the next generation cloud. So Oracle's next generation cloud is notionally faster, cheaper. And here we've got an example, I don't know if you can see it, of an 8-core instance, okay? And you can see that in the Oracle cloud, there's nearly 30,000 sessions you can have in that 8-core compared to roughly half of it in the competitors. And what that does is it makes it cheaper because it's more performant, okay? But also there are aspects to that cloud, like failover time, for example. They use something gratuitous ARP for failover in layer 2. And it's less than 150 milliseconds, which is very much, you can live with that in a voice network. But the traditional cloud vendors, the early adopters, use APIs, and it's like 2.5 seconds. That's very noticeable. And there's another interesting feature of the Oracle cloud as well, in that here we've got an example of 2K concurrent calls. That's about 15 terabytes of data a month. And in the Oracle cloud, they give you the first 10 terabytes of data transfer free. So of course, for small telcos, that's a really interesting cost saving, isn't it? So, there are some issues as well as to why the brakes have been put on, apart from things like the reliability of the cloud. And so, I mean, one of them is perceived, if the telcos outsource all their infrastructure to the cloud, then what's their value, right? But of course, what they miss out is that there are opportunities to do new things. You just have to move, right? Engineers foresee moving to the cloud as outsourcing everything is doing themselves out of a job. And the direction there seems to be white label, private cloud in own data centers, reliability I've mentioned. But now, so you can see they're starting to sense there's an opportunity. So there's a lot of big investment in 5G as a perceived vehicle for adding lots of new services. I haven't got a list of them. I think they're doing it thinking that they'll come along, right? It's also easier to add new services in the cloud. I'll show you a slide that illustrates that. And then cloud, of course, if you're working in the cloud, it's a lot easier to expand your business outside your traditional markets. And this is a customer of ours, Fuse2. They're lovely little... Wayne, who's the CTO, was one of the first was the first support techs I took on at Tomiko. But their standard network is not cloud-based, but they've been able to use Azure in Singapore and in North America to extend the Teams solution to so customers wanting to work with multinational office setups and they've been able to do it because they can use the cloud, right? I've got a feeling pressure from that timer. So it looks like the amount of capacity in the 5G world is set to cloud-based capacity is growing a lot over the next 5 years, up to 46%. They figure that there's 13% optimization in total cost of savings, so it's 13% in cost savings over the lifetime of the network. And for a big business, then there's up to 210 million additional revenues. Notwithstanding all that, telcos are still largely opting for private cloud. There's only 2 slides left, plus the last one's the most important, actually. Netaxis do work in the cloud. This is just really difficult to decipher small font block diagram, but this basically shows one of our services, which is Fusion, running in the Oracle cloud, and we're using a London and Amsterdam network, but we run containers and virtual machines, and we have, because of the improved security of using containers, then each customer in that cloud platform is in their own container. And our main product is a cloud-based docking station, which allows telcos to connect their own IT infrastructure to Zoom, in this case, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, WebEx, Cisco, Broadworks if you want, and so on, right? And so from a point of view of being able to easily add new features in the cloud, new services and functions, this is all an API-based docking station, right? And it's not, I mean, we do it, but other people do them as well, right? But that's the future for the, some people do their own, actually, some telcos. That makes the working in the cloud a lot easier. And I've only got 1 slide left now, and that is TrevBash, okay? TrevBash is on the 7th of December this year. LonApp are one of the sponsors. It's great. We've got Gamma are a sponsor. Anybody else in here who's a sponsor? TrevBash, this is the 14th TrevBash, okay? It's on the same Thursday every year. A lot of you come anyway, but you're all invited. It's a really fantastic end-of-year party for this industry and the telecoms industry. And the theme this year is Music Festival. Thank you very much. That's where you can get registered for tickets. Free. Okay? I'm over time.